Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Cutting Through the Noise. This is Shawn here, and today we're going to be talking about the Traction Channel speaking engagements with Michelle.
Hello.
So Michelle, tell us a little bit about what exactly a speaking engagement is defined as and why it's important.
Yeah. So in the past, some of the traction channels that we discussed are trade shows, conferences, those kind of gatherings. And speaking engagements is just another kind of spins off of that traction channel and the fact that you are the business that is asked to be a speaker. Like you're the one actually presenting, you're consulting. It's another way to connect with your audience and kind of show more about what you can do. And why this kind of matters is this really gives you the opportunity to actually sell yourself, but just show that you know what you're talking about and instills confidence in your audience that they know that you know what you're talking about. So it's a good opportunity to get involved in. And you can be anything from local engagements, so just like small networking events where, maybe you're presenting a topic to a small crowd, and then eventually working your way up through the regional size conferences or trade shows, and then working your way up to the national as well.
And what are some popular topics in your experience that you've seen at sort of speaking engagements at conferences and trade shows?
Yeah, so when it comes to topics, there does seem to be a lot of repetition in terms of the things that people talk about, but it seems like there's a lot of talks that go around like motivational, inspirational, anything that like goes from like talking about leadership experience and how to make that work for you, and then just success and another various business topics. Those are just kind of the big ones, but anything that inspires people to maybe do the same seems to be quite common.
Is there any data around how much people retain from these sorts of conferences? Is it, when somebody's going and sitting through all these, speeches on one day, is there any sort of anecdotal data on what people remember? Are they engaged? Do they follow up with businesses, sign up for newsletters, anything like that?
Yeah. So of course I always kind of like to look into the statistics of some of the channels that we're looking into. And if you've ever been in an audience, for one of these engagements, I feel like I can speak for myself when I say I listen to speakers and sometimes I lose interest. I'm like, okay, if you're not really, speaking or engaging with me, like I might not be paying attention to it. But some of the statistics for like an average rate of retention for just information in general, it's usually if it's just me telling you a couple points of facts or information, average retention rate is only about 5 to 10%. And but it's been found that if you actually add visuals or something else that kind of draws the eye when I'm telling you something, that can actually increase in retention rate upwards of like 25 to 30%. What really does well is when speakers kind of present it in a story. So they have all these facts or these advice that they have, but if they give it to you in a story form, that actually increases retention rate upwards of 65 to 70% for your audience. So that's something that's kind of cool to think about.
Yeah, so there's some good examples of things that work in a speaking engagement, and that just kind of leads me to think about some things that make it maybe not compelling. And one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to speaking engagements is when somebody puts a slide up there with a lot of words and then reads all the words. If I'm in the audience at a trade show or conference, there's a high likelihood that I can read, and so I don't need somebody reading to me, or I could just read their book. I think that's a common mistake. And I also think, people, I don't like to say speech because speech rhymes with preach, and I'm not going to a place to listen to somebody preach.
Right.
That's for Kanye West on Sundays. So I, really like that it is conversational. You said a story. And so when somebody's up there telling you the way it is and it just saying this is the way I do it, it just tends to really, turn me off and become not engaged. And a lot of these things, I was in conference over the summer in Denver, and, you're in a room from 9 to 5 listening to talk after talk after talk. And in this place, they chose to have it really dark. So, if you're kind of turning people off and you're speaking down at them, even though you're probably up on a stage going down, if you talk down to them, people are just going to tune out.
Yeah.
And so I think, the biggest thing is not to be preachy and not to be, of course, boring.
Right. And, actually one of the statistics I came across too was talking about like average audience attention span. It's anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes. So if you're doing a presentation that's going to go for like 40 minutes, you need they always talk about how like there should be like a cycle to it. Like maybe every 10 minutes you try to, add some more content that re-engages the audience. Like, again, nobody wants to just be talked down to. All right, so often at these conferences or trade shows, we're sitting through, or people that are attending it, they're sitting through a whole day of these kind of speeches. How do you keep people engaged?
Yeah, I think, the big thing is, again, not treating it like just a delivering of information or a speech. In a lot of places, people are like, okay, so I'm going to talk for 45 minutes and then we'll save 15 minutes for questions. Mm-hmm. The approach that I take and the approach that I appreciate is when, you ask for audience feedback throughout. And it's not necessarily just saying, raise your hand anytime you have a question, but asking a question of the audience, mm-hmm. And trying to engage them, that way. And so, because if people are just not interested in every single topic and they start tuning out, by the time you get to the end, they may have forgotten, how they were going to respond or what sort of question. So I think, asking people sort of audience participation is an important way to keep, people engaged and tuned in. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting note in the Traction channel book called Traction that some people tend to ask people to have divided attention, as in mm-hmm. pay attention to what is being talked about, but also share interesting tidbits on social media. Put something on Twitter like, oh, this guy just said this amazing thing, or, this woman just showed this stat that is just incredible, and, put it out there. Tag the conference, tag the presenter, and so that's a way to keep people engaged so they're not feeling like they're just sitting there staring up at the person sort of on the stage.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. And also, the slides, I mentioned earlier, not having a bunch of text on the slides. The slides also have to be fun. And I'm not saying like goofy
animations,
but, they just have to be bright and they have to be well thought out, a lot of white space, just, and have an impactful piece. Like each slide should tell its own story. Mm-hmm. And, some of the stats you just tossed out there were great. And if you were, giving this as a presentation, you want to have those numbers nice and big. And, so it's just little things like that keep people engaged.
Yeah. So, I know we've talked quite a bit about things that people are doing right that you've enjoyed, but are there any like common mistakes that you've come across in your experience?
Yeah, I think, it's public speaking is, obviously a lot of people have a fear of it. Not everybody's good at it, but people that are not relaxed, it very much comes across, and it can, be something that'll tune an audience out. So I think, sometimes people practice too hard, think about it too much. You just have to be relaxed and not treat it as a speech, but treat it as a conversation. So I think, the biggest thing that people sort of ignore or don't do is just not treat it like it's a one-on-one sort of thing, and everybody in that room is a like-minded individual. You're not trying to persuade anybody of anything. You're not, you're exchanging information. And, if you weren't up there presenting, you very well may be sitting down there. So yeah. I think it's, treating it as a conversation and not just a delivery of information, I think is really important. And thinking that way can help calm any fears of people who may have public speaking anxiety.
Yeah, actually, another fun fact, 75% of people that do, or 75% of the population would say that they have a fear of public speaking. So it's quite a few people that don't enjoy it, myself included.
I love it. I'm going to go do it after this.
Yeah? That's just what you do for a hobby now? Yeah.
I just go to the town square and start talking.
Yep. Just have an opinion and roll with it. So, we've seen a lot of speakers too that do tours. They constantly go to various like conference centers. Do you think when it comes to these different conferences that you need to come up with a new presentation every time, or do you think these speakers do best if they just keep the same material?
Yeah, I think you have to know your audience. If you're going on a tour where it's going to be the same people at all the stops, obviously you need to kind of keep it fresh. But if you think about doing a circuit of a digital marketing, if you think about doing the circuit, of these digital marketing events where it's the same event in different cities. You're not going to have people following you around. You're not the Grateful Dead. So I think having the same presentation, cuts down on your prep work, but also as you go speaking engagement to speaking engagement, you're going to get better at it. You're going to get more comfortable with it. You'll want to not be using the same slides, for 5 years. But I think being consistent and you really kind of honing what you're doing, as opposed to just, doing a new one, reading it in front of the mirror, then going out there. I think you can really, get tripped up that way. So a lot of people have maybe one or two versions and then kind of alternate them that way.
Okay. So I guess just again, in your experience, is there maybe like one thing that you can think of that is often overlooked when it comes to speaking engagements?
I think one thing that's overlooked is that it doesn't end when you walk off stage. There's only there's only going to be so many people in the auditorium. So definitely need to have it recorded. Definitely need to distribute it, on social media, on the convention's website, send out slides, just kind of continue to sort of engage with the audience that was there after, but also know that you're going to get to other people. So if you're giving this free information to somebody who was there, there's a good chance they're going to share it with a coworker or they're going to share it with a fan. So I think, people just assume that you get up there, you talk for 25 minutes and then you're done, but it doesn't end there. And, if you're going to, convert somebody in the audience to a lead, you have to continue to engage. And who knows, the lead or the person that you want to connect with may not even be in the room. Right. So you kind of have to treat this as a living, breathing thing. It's just like what we're doing right now, or a video that you can find on our YouTube channel. It was recorded and we have an audience right now of one, but more people are going to see it. So you kind of have to treat it as a way to gather an asset that's evergreen, in addition to, the person-to-person contact, which, that's the other thing too about speaking engagements is you can't go and then go back to your room. You need to use the opportunity for some face-to-face time. So not treating it like just a 25-minute block of your time, and more of a whole campaign, so to speak, is, I think, important.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you can also think of it too as like a little, if you record your engagements and stuff, that could also be like your little portfolio that maybe will get you seen by other like conferences or larger scale that you want to be actually speaking at. So cool. Yeah.
And I think, the other key piece of this whole thing is the chicken and the egg aspect is you do have to get accepted,
right.
To speak. And there's an article on PinLaGroup.com that talks through ways to identify events that you should go to that are relevant to your business, that are relevant to you, best ways to write proposals, when to do it, things like that. So be sure to check that out on the blog. And then also we have a video that kind of goes a little bit more in depth than what we just talked about, and just also some ways to engage with your audience after your speaking engagement.
Cool. Well, I think you've answered all my questions, Shawn. So thanks for talking with us about the speaking engagements.
Yeah, it's great. Another episode of Cutting Through the Noise. We'll see you guys next time.
Yep.